Ejiro's eyes widened in shock as he saw his wife lying unconscious on the floor. This was her third pregnancy, and he panicked at the thought of them losing another baby. He could remember the doctor saying that this pregnancy might be their last because of some medical complications that his wife suffered during her last pregnancy. Ejiro stood there shaking as he knelt beside his wife, pondering on what to do. Essie, Essie, wake up, he said softly, gently touching her to see if she would respond. But his wife, Essie, remained still, showing no sign of movement. Ejiro began to panic, his heart racing, as he prayed for the safety of his wife and unborn child. The thought of losing them was a thought that he could not bear, so he quickly rushed his wife into his rickety car and drove off to the hospital. The drive seemed like an eternity, and every second felt like a year to Ejiro, whose heart too raced with fear. Few minutes later, they arrived at the hospital, and Issei was quickly rushed into the emergency room. Ejiro had never been this terrified in his entire life. His nightmare of the other night was now making sense to him. Filled with extreme fear, he wept uncontrollably, praying to God to spare his wife and unborn child, even if it meant taking his own life in exchange. Ejiro was asleep a few nights ago when he had a troubling dream where he saw his wife disappear into a very bright light. She was no longer pregnant, and Ejiro did not know what to make of the dream. He woke up confused and tried to get his mind off the dream, believing that it was only a nightmare. Now, he stood there terrified of his nightmare, hoping that it doesn't come to pass. Time in that moment seemed to crawl by like a snail, with each minute feeling like eternity. It was the longest night of Ijiro's life, as he awaited a word from the doctors, who seemed to be running in and out of the emergency room without giving him any updates on his wife and baby. Several hours passed, and a doctor walked up to him with an expression that seemed to trouble his heart. "How is my wife and baby?" Ejiro asked the doctor, who paused for a moment and informed him that his wife was dead. "However, your daughter is still alive, but she was born prematurely, without a vagina. Her organs had not fully formed before she was born, and the doctor believed that it will have a lasting effect on her." Ejiro stood there, unable to grapple with the news of his wife's death, as well as the premature birth of his daughter, who was born without a vagina, a condition that the doctors in the hospital had never seen before. Ejiro was unsure of what to do or make of the situation. He buried his wife and took his daughter home to live with him. As the years went by, Ejiro devoted himself to raising his daughter alone, caring for her the best way that he could. He chose not to remarry, fearing what would happen when people realized that his daughter was born different. His family, fearing that he would find it difficult to care for his daughter all by himself, introduced him to several women, but Ejiro politely declined their offer, assuring them that he didn't need any help raising his daughter. So, for years, Ejiro cared for his daughter alone, and as the years went by, his daughter Dise grew into a very beautiful young woman. She was a beauty to behold, in fact, one of the most beautiful women around. Her father in this time amassed so much wealth and ensured that he gave his daughter the best of everything in life. She attended the best of schools, had the best clothes, and even grabbed the attention of the most eligible bachelors around. Her father referred to her as his good luck charm and never spared any opportunity to show her how much she meant to him. However, behind all this perfection was a secret that Dise could not bear to divulge to anyone, not even her best friend Onome. Dise was so careful around Onome, ensuring not to reveal too much about herself. She guarded her secret fiercely, always maintaining a distance whenever the conversation veered too close to personal matters. Despite her beauty and charm, Dise felt an immense sadness, knowing that she could never have the life that other women had. One day, Dise paid her friend a visit and realized that she was already heading out to the nearby salon to braid her hair.
Your hair needs to be braided as well.
Onome said to Dise, who knew that this was an indirect invitation to the salon.
Why don't you just go straight to the point and plead with me to escort you to the salon?
Dise said to Onome, who laughed and dragged her to the hair salon. On their way, they came across a very handsome young man who seemed to be so focused on Dise. He was so captivated by her beauty and decided to speak to her, but Dise informed him that they were rushing to the salon, and the young man informed them that he too was also heading to the salon. Dise laughed out loud as she looked at his hair, asking what he planned to do in the salon, and the young man smiled and teased her, saying that he would do whatever she was planning to do on her hair. The young man, whose name was Efosa, followed them to the salon and spent hours chatting and talking to Dise, whose hair was being braided as they conversed. Her friend Onome sat there quietly as she listened in on their conversation, feeling so agitated to see her friend engulfed in her conversation with the strange man. After several hours, they completed their braids and decided to head back home. Efosa could not help but stare in admiration at Dise, whose beauty captivated his heart. A few minutes later, Dise bid Efosa goodbye and rushed up to meet her friend Onome, who was waiting patiently for her by the roadside.
Hmm, I can see you like him.
Onome teased Dise, who tried to mask how she really felt. They walked for a few minutes, and Onome jokingly asked Dise why all the young men seemed to be drawn to her. What do you even have in this your body that all the men want you? She said to Dise as she laughed and teased her even more. Dise tried to laugh it off, but Onome's words struck a chord deep within her soul. Her smile faded for just a moment as she quickly turned her face away to hide the sadness that suddenly crept over her face. Dise's mind wandered back to her secret, the one thing that she believed set her apart from every other woman. No matter how many men admired her or how many friends she had, she always felt a deep unspoken distance between herself and the world. She knew that if anyone found out about the truth, they would never look at her the same way again. Her friend Onome noticed the change in her mood and informed her that it was only a joke. I was just joking, she said with a grin as Dise forced a smile on her lips and nodded, trying to push her heavy thoughts aside. They continued to walk home, and Onome thought it wise to change the topic, seeing what her careless statement had done to her friend. Hope your outfit is ready for my party, Onome asked Dise, who smiled and informed her that her father was picking up the dress that evening. Onome's birthday party was in a few days, and Onome's elder sister promised to make the party a memorable one for her. Dise was so eager to attend because of the myriad of activities that had been planned out by Onome's adventurous sister. They arrived their street, and Dise walked down to her house, whilst her friend Onome walked down to hers. They both lived adjacent from each other, and this made it easy for them to bond as friends, owing to the fact that they spent so much of their time together. Dise knew Onome like the palm of her hand, her favorite color, song, and even her deepest secrets. However, Onome had no idea who Dise really was. They were friends, but Dise was so uptight and secretive, only sharing basic information with Onome, who opened up herself to her like an open book. As Dise walked into her room, she caught sight of her black dress, which looked so beautiful and perfect. However, she could not help but feel saddened, knowing that the dress, just like her beauty, was a facade, hiding the truth of who she truly was. The day of the party arrived, and Dise put on her beautiful dress and walked out to meet her father, whose jaw dropped to see how beautiful she looked. You look beautiful, my princess, he said as tears poured down his eyes. Dise wished at that point to find a man like her father who would love her unconditionally. Her father was the only one who she believed would accept her the way she was. Her heart was so full of emotions as she hugged her father tightly, thanking him for always being there for her. Her father, seeing how emotional she was, assured her that no matter what happens, he would always be there for her. With this assurance, Disa stepped out of her house, feeling so courageous as she headed to Onome's house for the party. As she stepped her foot into Onome's house, she caught sight of Efosa, who happened to be Onome's sister's friend. They exchanged pleasantries, and Dise quickly rushed off to meet her friend Onome, who was so delighted to see her. "You look so beautiful," she said to Onome, who happily took her to meet her other friends. The party was now in full bloom, and Onome's sister stepped forward to announce that it was game time. "Truth or dare," she said, as everyone screamed out excitedly and gathered around the room. Dise stood there, unsure of what to do, her heart racing through her chest as she thought of a million and one things that could go wrong. Her friend Onome, seeing how uneasy she looked, assured her that it was only a game. Dise summoned the courage and joined the game, and before she knew what was happening, she was engulfed in the game of truth or dare. Everyone laughed at the stupid dares that were being given, as well as the truths that people were willing to spill. As the bottle spun around, Disa's heart began to race. She hoped it wouldn't point to her, praying silently to remain unnoticed. But as fate would have it, the bottle stopped, pointing directly at Dise, whose heart began to beat like an African drum. Everywhere fell silent as all the attention turned to Dise, who wished for the ground to open up and swallow her. Efosa, who was standing across from her in the room, smiled warmly at her, trying to ease her nerves. "Truth or dare?" Onome's sister asked Dise, with a playful grin on her face. Dise stood there, tongue-tied, as she deliberated on the option to choose. Taking a deep breath and casting all cares to the wind, Dise chose to tell a truth. Onome's sister, who was known for her curiosity, leaned in closer and asked Dise a question that she never saw coming. "What is the one thing you have never told anyone, not even your best friend Onome?" Dise, in that moment, felt her heart drop into her stomach. Her chest tightened as her palms grew sweaty. Dise could feel all eyes on her, waiting for her response. Her mind raced as she tried to think of a harmless secret to share, something that wouldn't reveal too much of what she was hiding. "Come on, Dise, you can tell us," her friend Onome said, as she tried to encourage her to speak. Dise swallowed hard, forcing a smile on her face. "Well," she began slowly, "I guess I've never told anyone that I'm afraid of cats." This was the first thing that came to her mind, a lie in its entirety, because even Onome knew how much she loved cats. Everyone burst out in laughter as they teased her playfully, making cat-like sounds at her. Dise feigned fear as she played along with the joke to keep her secret safe. She was relieved that the answers seemed to satisfy everyone, and they quickly moved on to the next person. Dise was so relieved to have dodged the bullet. She excused herself immediately as she could not risk being put on the spot again. She stood in a corner, thinking about her life and all the things that could have gone wrong. Just as she stood there alone, Efosa walked up to her and teased her about her supposed fear of cats. "I never took you for someone who feared cats," he said to Dise, who smiled and said to him that she was braver than he thought. They both began to converse, talking about everything that crossed their minds. Their connection seemed to be effortless, as if they had known each other for years. Every laugh, every shared glance, and every word exchanged felt natural and comforting, weaving a bond that grew stronger with each passing moment. As the night wore on, Disa could notice how drawn she was to Efosa. They talked and laughed, sharing stories of their past, and Dise found herself slowly forgetting about her worries. She just wanted to bask in the moment forever, as Efosa seemed to calm her very spirit. Efosa too was slowly falling in love with Dise, his mind envisioning her as his bride and imagining a future together. He admired her beauty and charm. The way her mind worked intrigued him, and Efosa could not help but feel a deep connection with her. They talked till the party was over, and both wished that the party would continue forever. They were having a great time and didn't want the party to end. Seeing that he had no other option but to leave, Efosa invited Dise out on a date the next evening, and Dise could not help but smile. Several men had asked Dise out in the past, but Dise never felt this way with them. She seemed to feel something different with Efosa, who made her feel seen and understood in a way that no one else had ever done. Despite the joy and excitement that she felt, Lisa felt so nervous about letting anyone too close. Her secret and the thought of being rejected filled her with fear as she pondered on what to do. In that moment, her friend Onome walked up to her and pleaded with her to sleep over at her house. I have something to discuss with you, she said to Dise, who agreed to stay over at her house. Efosa and all the other guests left, and Onome took Dise to her room to discuss all that happened at the party. Efosa asked me out on a date, Dise said to her friend Onome, who could not hold back her excitement. This calls for celebration, Onome said aloud as she grabbed a bottle of wine and poured in two glasses. Onome could tell that her friend Dise was in love. She had never seen her so happy in her life and could not help but tease her for falling helplessly in love with him. The next morning, they woke up with pounding headaches. The wine they had indulged in the previous night left them with a lingering hangover. Dise, barely lucid, decided to return home to freshen up and clear her head. She got to her room and collapsed into her bed, consumed by the thought of her date with Efosa that evening. Dise felt a wave of terror in her heart, as well as an overwhelming sense of joy to see Efosa again. She loved him so much and feared how he would react, knowing about her condition. The thought of this sent shivers down her spine as she decided to seek the advice of her dear father, the only man who she knew would love her no matter what. They sat at the table that morning for breakfast, and Dise informed her father of her date. The smile on her father's face gladdened her heart greatly as she went on to ask him what she should do now that a man had shown interest in her. Her father, with a very calm tone, explained to her that a man who loves her genuinely will love her regardless of her situation. He assured her that even if no man decides to love her, he, her father, would love her and be with her till the end of time. And Dise could not hold back her tears. She was so full of courage, knowing that her father would always be there for her, no matter what. She waited patiently for evening and got dressed in one of her best dresses that not only complimented her complexion but also made her feel comfortable and elegant. Efosa arrived her home just in time, and they set out to a very beautiful restaurant in town for their date. Dise looked so breathtaking, and Efosa could not help but stare. He complimented her looks, saying that he could bet she looked so much like her mother, and Dise smiled and informed him that her mother was no more. She died immediately after giving birth to me, she said to Efosa, who could feel the sadness in her voice as she spoke about her mother. He quickly apologized for making her remember such a bad memory, and Dise assured him that it was fine as she never got the opportunity to meet her dear mother. My father never stopped telling me how much I reminded him of her. He loved her so much that he refused to get married to another woman, saying that no woman was worthy enough to replace my dear mother. Efosa, listening to these words, could see that Dise was brought up in a home full of love. He could see how passionately she spoke about her father and went on to request an audience with him. Dise looked at him shocked and asked why he wanted to meet her father, and Efosa revealed to her that he was deeply in love with her and wanted to marry her. Dise could feel her heart race through her chest. She was so excited to know that Efosa loved her as much as she loved him. However, she feared what would happen if he found out about her secret. At this point, she was torn between telling him her darkest secret or leaving everything to fate. Her father's words echoed in her mind as she battled with her thoughts. Efosa could not help but notice that something was amiss. He asked what the problem was, and Dise pretended not to be troubled by anything. I just remembered that I have to get home early, she said to Efosa, who quickly drove her home and urged her to arrange a meeting for him with her father. Dise smiled as she watched him drive off from her house. It was as though Efosa was driving out of her life, and Dise struggled with the thought of ever losing him. She walked into her house, feeling so sad and worried, and met her father, who asked how her date went. Dise could not hide her worry from her father. She shared everything that had happened with him, and he advised her to be honest with Efosa, especially since he seemed genuinely interested in marrying her. What if he decides not to marry me again? She asked her father, whose heart broke to see her in such distress. You will never know until you try, her father said to her calmly, as he assured her that whatever would be would be. Whoever is for you would look past your flaws and stick with you no matter what, he said to Dise, who decided in that moment to heed to her father's advice. She retired to bed and found it difficult to sleep. Moments later, she fell into a very deep sleep and had a terrifying nightmare where a group of strange women surrounded her and tried to look underneath her skirt. Dise was so terrified and screamed out for help. When she saw Efosa running away from her in terror, Dise woke up from her dream shaking as she sat up in bed, her eyes wide in shock as fear crept through her body. She could not stand the thought of losing Efosa, and her dream seemed to be pointing in that direction. A few hours later, her friend Onome paid her a visit, and Dise stylishly asked her friend what she would do if she had a secret that could ruin her chances of ever finding love. And Onome, without thinking twice, informed her that she would keep the secret hidden for as long as she could. Dise, in that moment, decided to keep her secret hidden for as long as she could. Who knows? Anything can happen before then, she said to herself as she decided to enjoy the moment and let fate take its course. As days turned into weeks, Dise and Efosa continued to grow closer. They spent so much time together, and soon Efosa paid a visit to her father to declare his intention to marry her. Dise was so excited to see her dream come true. A day for her wedding was set, and preparations began almost immediately. Efosa introduced Dise to his family, who loved her dearly and took her like their own, especially his mother and sister, who could not stop showering her with love and attention. The day drew closer, and one evening, Efosa called Dise aside and told her how excited he was to marry her. You are the perfect one for me, he said to Dise, who stood there broken to see the sincerity in his eyes as he spoke. She knew the burden that she carried in her heart and was scared that one day it will all explode to her face, ruining all the magical moments that they had built together. She finally summoned the courage to tell him the truth, but something unexpected happened as Dise heard a familiar voice that asked her why she refused to tell Efosa that she was born without a vagina. It was her friend Onome, and Dise wondered how she got to find out about the truth. Tension filled the air as Efosa looked at Dise in confusion, trying to comprehend what Onome had just revealed. Dise's heart sank as she watched her worst fear unfold before her eyes. Her secret was now in the open, in the worst way possible, and she could not believe that her friend would ever do such a thing to her. She then wondered how Onome got to know about her secret. Little did she know that on the night of Onome's birthday, Onome purposely gave her the wine to drink. Knowing how light-headed she was, she ensured that she was intoxicated and used the opportunity to ask Dise about her deepest secret, and Dise divulged all her secrets to her, not knowing what she was doing at the time. Onome, for all these months, had her eyes fixed on Efosa and was bitter to see him with her friend Dise. Her sister planned on linking her with Efosa, but as fate would have it, Efosa met Dise and fell in love with her before her sister was opportune to introduce them. When Onome got to know this, she was so furious because she had heard so much about him from her sister and was looking forward to meeting him. Onome watched as her friend stole the heart of the man that she so secretly desired. Fueled by jealousy and bitterness, she decided to use the information she had obtained from Dise in her intoxicated state to break them apart. Onome, why would you do this? Dise asked, her voice trembling, tears welling up in her eyes. How could you betray me like this? Efosa, still in shock, looked at Dise and asked if the revelation was true. Is it true, Dise? Were you born without a vagina? He asked Dise, who had no other option but to tell him the truth. I was just about to tell you, before she let the cat out of the bag, Dise said to Efosa, who stood there frozen, as his mind began to process everything that he had just heard. Dise watched as her greatest fear materialized before her eyes. She could see confusion, fear, and betrayal on his face, the exact expression that made her keep her secret for this long. Tears poured down her eyes as she turned to leave, remembering her father, who she knew would always be there for her, regardless of whatever happens. Lisa craved the presence of her father, as all she wanted to do in that moment was cry to her heart's content and never show her face to the world again. Just as she turned to leave, Efosa rushed to stop her, asking why she didn't tell him sooner. Efosa was not put off by the fact that she was born special. He was only concerned that Dise did not trust him enough to tell him sooner. I wish you had told me sooner, Dise, Efosa said gently, stepping closer to her. But I understand why you were afraid. I can't imagine how hard it must have been for you to keep such a secret for this long. Dise looked up at him, surprised by his reaction. You are not angry with me? Efosa shook his head. No, Dise, I'm not angry. Hurt, yes, because I wish I could have been there for you sooner, to support you, to show you that my love isn't based on something like this. I love you for who you are, Dise, and nothing can ever change that. Onome in that moment felt so embarrassed to see her plan flop before her eyes. She let jealousy and resentment cloud her judgment, hoping that the revelation would break them apart and put a halt to their wedding plans. What she did not see coming was the fact that true love transcends physical imperfections and secrets. Efosa's love for Dise was true, as he accepted her wholeheartedly, despite her condition. With tears in her eyes and a heart full of regret, Onome realized that her actions, driven by jealousy and bitterness, had only shown the strength of Efosa and Dise's love for each other. She felt ashamed and small for what she had done. Unable to bear the weight of her shame, Onome turned to leave when Dise called out to her to say that she had forgiven her. I don't know why you did what you did, but I want you to know that I forgive you. We were once close friends, and I hope you find it in your heart to understand the hurt that you have caused me. Onome stood there stunned as Dise's words pierced through her soul. I am so sorry, Dise. I let my jealousy get the best of me, and I hurt you in a way that no friend ever should. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I am truly sorry. Dise nodded, her eyes softening, as she looked at her former friend. It's okay, Onome. We all make mistakes. Just promise me you will never let jealousy consume you like this again. Onome nodded as she promised and walked away. Efosa turned to Dise, his eyes full of admiration and love. You are truly amazing, Dise, he said softly. Your strength, your forgiveness, your love, they are all the things that make you who you are, and I am so lucky to have you in my life. Dise could not help but smile, her heart filled with gratitude and love for the man who had stood by her, even when her deepest fears were laid bare. I am lucky to have you too, Efosa. You have shown me what true love really means. As they stood together, They knew that their love story was just beginning. The challenges they had faced together had only strengthened their bond, and they were ready to face whatever the future held for them. The wedding preparations continued, and Dise was home admiring her wedding dress when Efosa's mother walked in and told her that the wedding will not hold. Over my dead body will I allow a woman who has no vagina to marry my son? You are not complete yourself. How then do you think that you can complete my son? She asked Dise, whose heart shattered to see her whole world crumble before her eyes. Your father thinks he can make this so easy, she said to Dise, who she told to warn her father to stay away from them. Dise stood there stunned as she tried to figure out all that was happening. My father? What has my father got to do with all of this? She said to herself as she sat there and waited for her father to return. A hurdle that she thought she had successfully crossed was only just beginning, and Dise wondered what would become of her now that her secret was now in the open. Will Efosa have the willpower to stand by her despite his mother's disapproval, or will her life come to ruins now that her secret was now in the open? What role has her father played in all of this? Only time will tell. Watch out for part 2.